Welcome to the Laurent Collective podcast, where we go deeper than just surface talk.
Each week, we'll explore everything from family, business, creativity, culture, and faith.
To make sure not to miss an episode, be sure to subscribe and hop on to Instagram at Laurent Collective to chat with us about this episode. Hello.
Hello. Here we are again.
Yes. You didn't say we're back.
We didn't say we're back. That has been our thing recently. I'm so sorry. We're back.
Yeah. Well, and welcome if you're new.
Yes, and welcome if you're new. We are here today to talk about our thoughts on raising a teenager. So we have a 15-year-old. I can't believe I had to think about that for a second.
He's been a teenager for a couple years now.
So we have a couple years under our belt. We just have some thoughts that, like, if you are in those years, we're right there with you. If you are approaching them and you're looking at them with fear or dread, we thought we'd talk about that.
Well, because we're on the verge of another one.
Yes, we have another one coming up. And we are speaking to you of the fact that literally we are not experts.
No.
This is our experience. Everyone's experience will be different.
We're learning in real time.
We are definitely learning in real time. And there are some things, as we have another one coming up that is a tween that is going to be turning a teenager, that there are things with him that I know are going to be different than with our oldest. Like, so that is the other thing. We already know those things are going to be different. So probably in a couple of years, we'll have another podcast for you that will say, oh, here's some others.
Yeah. Or,
and we have a
that
boy.
Was totally different.
We don't have a girl. I know, like, not to put gender on and say that it is different, but we have already experienced differences in some things. And so all that to say, this is not an expert. This is our own experience. And some things that are, it's just our thoughts, basically. Just our thoughts. Yeah. Basically, the idea came from, I have listened to some other people talk about raising teenagers, and I thought, oh, that makes me feel so much better. And I thought, you guys might need to hear that too if you're there or you're about there. To be in the same club, to say, yes, those things are normal and those kinds of things. I think the analogy that I have always loved is from Jen Hatmaker, who I think she has all teenagers now and some off in university and stuff like that. But she uses the analogy of raising a teenager is on a constant roller coaster. And so the idea is, like, with their hormones and their emotions and all that stuff, it's just, you know, when you're on a roller coaster, if you like roller coasters, if not, you can envision it. And you're like, you know, kind of, it coasts for a little bit and then it gets to this, you know, place where it just is slowly cranking.
Build up.
It's this build up to go up, and you know, like, what's coming. You know, as soon as you get to that top, you're going to be going really, really fast. And then, you know, there's a loop here and there's a loop there and that kind of thing. And then you kind of have this place where it, like, coasts for a minute and then it goes again. And then at the end it coasts and it kind of goes in and then you can safely get off the roller coaster. Yeah. Goes in for landing. That's not the right word. Goes into stop.
Yeah. It comes into the, I don't know.
Yeah. And so, like, if you can picture that, or gosh, remember your own teenage years. Like, when I think back and think of some of the outbursts I had or stuff like that, I mean, that's totally what it was. It was a roller coaster. And some roller coasters are short and some roller coasters are long and some have more turns and twists and things like that. And some are a little bit more kid friendly. And so
it's interesting to say, but yeah,
you never know what you're getting. Yeah. And it can change at a drop of a hat, and suddenly they're on a roller coaster. So here is having heard that helps me think through what our teenager is going through, but it also helps me realize we have done that roller coaster before. I don't want to do it again. Like, we don't have to get on the roller coaster with him. And so I think that is my number one thought on raising a teenager and what we've experienced so far is when he is on the roller coaster, for whatever reason, we do not have to get on it with him. And that is one of the hardest things to do. I think
in some ways that's just being a parent in general.
Well, that is. Yes. But it's to a different level when you're a teenager.
I mean, with a teenager, it's heightened.
Yes.
The roller coasters become the big roller coasters.
It has. Yes, it has.
You have to be a certain height to ride those rides, basically. So
I don't want to meet that height requirement.
Yeah.
So I think that is, if you can envision that and stick with that, that has helped me so much, because there are often moments where, where whatever, something has happened, and it's usually something small that is like, it doesn't ever feel like it's anything big. Sometimes it is though, but something small that has like hit him off or something, and it becomes a very huge deal for him, and suddenly I can catch myself, or both of us are like raising our voices or reacting like we're jumping on the roller coaster with him, and realizing like actually we're just making, usually what that does is it just makes it worse. It makes it more heightened. It makes his roller coaster have more turns, like that kind of thing. And for us, if we would have just been the person that's like not controlling the roller coaster, because we can't control it, but watching it, you have a different feeling when you're watching it. Like, oh, sure. I feel bad for those people. I wish I could help them. And as a parent, you want to help them. And so we literally use this phrase with him. We literally say, like, you're on the roller coaster right now. When you feel yourself getting off, like, let us know. Sometimes it really makes him mad when we say that. And that kind of thing. Or, it's more often than not that he's having an interaction with one of his siblings, and he's on the roller coaster and they're trying to figure out what just happened. I don't understand what, snapped, and that kind of thing. We actually do use that phrase. Now, we explained that phrase to him.
Right. He knows what that means.
Before he went through puberty and stuff like that. We talked about that. That's one key for us, that like our thoughts on raising a teen is like talking openly before they get there. Because then it leaves it as an open space once they are hitting those things that they don't understand what's happening and why they're all over the place and things are changing and that kind of thing. And so even before that, we've used that phrase of a roller coaster, so that he knows what we're talking about. We're not just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Or talk to your teen about it like when they're in a calm space, not, this is, you're on a roller coaster and this is not in the middle of the heated, whatever they're heated about at the moment. The other idea is like we used for one of our kids when they were younger, for some people call it timeout. We always called it a reset. And it was like a jar with water in it, and we had filled it with glitter. I hate glitter, but we did use that at one point. We had filled it with glitter, and the idea was like to shake up the glitter jar and then set it down, and once the glitter settled, they could get up as long as their mood had changed and stuff like that. And so we've explained that to Zane too. Like, it's like you have that jar and everything's settled, and then something happens and it shakes it all up, and then it does take time for it to settle. And that kind of thing. So that has been one of our things, but then to also not immerse yourself in with the glitter or on the roller coaster is the hardest thing as a parent.
Yeah, definitely. I think being in this stage with Zane, to be honest, like, and being, raising him in a different country, and like, there's just some unique things that, are specific to us, obviously, but I think are kind of widely spread. And I think, for everyone to understand that concept, the roller coaster concept is really helpful. And that allows, even in a moment where, Maya and I, like, one of us might actually step on the roller coaster with him, and the other one's like, you're on the roller coaster too. Like,
we call each other out.
Like, what's going on? Like, why did you do that?
Walk away.
Like, get off now. Like, there's no reason to do that. So I think, again, keeping an open line of communication and all of it. And you're right. Like, making sure that, you're talking about some of these concepts like outside of when they actually happen is really key as well. So then when they do happen, it's hopefully, there's a sense of understanding of like what is actually happening and things like that. And I mean, to be fair, like, Zane specifically, he's really open to conversation, and he communicates with us pretty well for the most part. And I think, but I think we've worked really hard to keep those lines of communication open, and that, pretty much for the most part, like, no subject is untouchable in our house, like, that we would talk to him about.
There isn't. No, like, we always say that's always completely open. And I think in that calm space, finding out, and you may be able to identify this more because, I mean, you've seen your kid as they've grown up and stuff, but as they change, they may have different things. Is finding out when they are on the roller coaster, what do they need to do to help themselves get off of it? And normally it is not continuing to interact with you. What is so even think of yourself when you get angry and you get, or, emotional or whatever it is in your life, there's usually some certain things that you have figured out that like, I need to calm myself down before I interact more. And your teen is going to need help figuring out what those things are. And once they figure them out, then you can say like, go do this. So Zane going on a walk by himself and listening to music is super helpful for him.
Yeah.
And he will come back a changed person every single time. And so if it's, something like that, we can say like, I think you just need to go on a walk. And it's like his cue.
And he's like, yeah, I do.
And he's like, yep. And then he just leaves, I'm like, before you say more or you say something hurtful, like, I think you should go on a walk. And he'll leave and huffy and stuff like that. And he'd be fine with us saying this. And he'll come back and he'll usually almost always start the conversation with, I'm sorry, or here's why I got mad, or this is why that upset me. He has drums. I mean, I'm glad he picked that instrument because it's like, it's a nice one. Now, right? Well, it is loud, but he has electronic drums, so it's not as loud. But, sometimes he'll go down and he shares a room with his brother and we're like, your brother needs space. And he goes down and drums or whatever it may be. So those kinds of things, what is that outlet for your kid? I know it's not always appropriate to say, or not maybe safe to say, leave the house, go on a walk, but whatever is the thing that you think is helpful, or help them discover that, help them try some different things, talk to them again in that calm time and figure out what is the thing and then after they get off the roller coaster, have a conversation about it. I think, and we probably have done this a number of times, if like it's over, like, oh, thank you, we made it through that. Yeah. But it's kind of sometimes of like, well, how did you feel during that? What was the thing that set you off? And there are a lot of times that Zane will say, I honestly have no clue why I got mad about that. And that's just, and to say to him, yes, exactly. That's normal. Yeah. What you're experiencing is normal. Like for him to know. And I think that's the hardest thing. And I remember that as a teenager of like at the aftermath of some outburst that I'd be like, why did I just do that? And then you feel like a horrible person and all those kinds of things. And that spiral can happen really quick. And we don't want our kids to go into that. We want them to to be like, yep, your body's changing. Your hormones are changing. Your emotions are everywhere right now. That's what everyone experiences that as a teenager. Everyone's going to be on different spectrums of experiencing that, depending on your unique makeup.
Yeah. I think also too, being aware like each kid is different. So like whether even if they're off the roller coaster, making sure it's an appropriate time to like bring it back up. Yeah. And help them process it.
You can simply say, are you ready to talk about that?
Because some of us, we don't want to process it right away. Some of us do. Like, so again, being aware of how your child, like how your teenager like does that is super important. Because, if he's off, bringing it back up again might set him off again. So it's like more just trying to be aware of some of that stuff as well, I think.
And I think it's talking about, we've talked about this on different podcasts in different ways and stuff like that, but it's talking about like, again, each kid is unique. And so different like rules or boundaries and stuff like that may look different for each kid. And so we talk openly about that. Like we help, some we're very stern on, like, sorry, you're not on social media. It's not even a conversation. Kind of thing for now. It's conversation when he hits a certain age, and then we'll have a conversation about that.
And he continues to not want it anyway, so that's
I have
helpful.
A feeling some of our kids will push us more on that. Yeah. That's not something he pushes on. Now, does he push on other things? 100% yes. I mean, I don't want to put the picture of like he doesn't push on other things, but we often have this, this is why we have this boundary. And I'm sorry, as you're not quite ready yet to not have any boundaries. Like in life, you will always have to have some kind of boundaries. Yeah. And so this is why we have this boundary. And sometimes we use the analogy, we're using lots of analogies in this, aren't we? But it's true, of the idea of like a rope. And that, and the idea of like, we're going to give you some freedom in whatever this thing is. But if we find out you lie to us or you do these different things, the rope comes in closer and you're not going to have as much rope length to like work with in the freedom and that kind of thing. And he totally understands that sometimes you're like, oh, I'm not going to have the rules are going to be stricter.
I understand you're going to have to rein it in.
We're like, yep. And we're like, yeah. And he's like, that's fair. I mean, I'm saying that once he's in calm, sometimes that's not happening. But he'll even sometimes say, and we always say it's better to tell the truth because guess what? If we find out that you're lying about it, that rope's going to get even closer to us, and that kind of thing. But as we're saying all this, I also want to say, because sounds slightly negative, and raising a teenager, and we're right in the middle of it, and have another one coming, and then we'll have another one, is not easy. And so you need to figure out too what causes you to get on their roller coasters and what causes you to calm down as well, because I mean, gosh, that can, there's nothing worse than your kids sometimes saying something horrible to you that will get you right on the roller coaster. So remembering that, like, this is normal for them, but also how to care for yourself in it. But I also want to say, like, I love this age.
Yeah, I'm having so much fun.
Like, and this is probably, each of our kids are at a really cool stage, but it's one of the hardest stages for me, because I'm realizing we only have so much time with him left at home.
Yeah.
So that emotion comes into me a lot. But also the fact that, like, we have great conversations with him. Mm-hmm. Like, if you allow space to just be with your kids and whatever, engage in the things they like.
Yep.
I feel like with our boys, at least, it's so much easier for me to go on a walk or do something, activity with them and talk to them. Mm-hmm. Same with Veda, though, at the same time. Like, the conversations I have with her on a walk or something like that are different than, like, just sit down.
Yeah.
But, like, our dinner table recently, we have had hilarious conversations and, like, been laughing to the point of crying.
Stuff coming out of noses.
Like, yes. I think there was some ranch that came out of somebody's nose and mouth, and because they were laughing. But also then there's this cool thing of getting to introduce them to things and getting to talk to them about things. Age appropriate, and in each kid is going to be different in what age that's appropriate for. But, like, we made a list of movies that we want to show Zane, either because they're hilarious and they're funny, mm-hmm. and he can get some of that humor now, or because they deal with some pretty serious stuff, mm-hmm. and we want to talk to him about that.
Or like movies that just had an impact on us growing up.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether they're funny or not, or whatever.
And
like,
explaining why they
had
an
impact. Things that we enjoy.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing that I'm really enjoying now, is that we get to share some of that, I don't know, the stuff that really makes us tick, mm-hmm. with him. And vice versa, we get to step into his world in a fun way that, instead of just, like, sitting in front of the TV and watching Sesame Street or playing trains with him or whatever, like, now it's like we're getting to watch him create music, and then, like, sitting with him at night and going, oh, let's listen. Like, I want to hear how it went tonight. Like, what did you create? And, like, or, again, like you said, going on a walk with him and just hearing, like, what do you think about what's going on in the world right now? Like he has thoughts, and
he has opinions. And he doesn't have to agree with us either. We say that you do not have to be on the same agreement with us. Let's talk about it.
Just being able to do that with him is, like, it's just, and to see him growing into a man is just really cool and exciting and scary and sad at the same time, because, again, like what Maya just said, like the fact that, in a couple years, his presence won't be in the house as much. I can't even
talk about it.
And it's just, like, it's crazy, like, to even think about that. It just feels like yesterday that he was, like, coming home. We brought him home, and we thought, we didn't put the car seat in the car right. And Maya was telling me not to, like, drive over certain bumps because she was afraid it was going to hurt him and things like that. So, now he's, like,
he survived.
He's shaving his face and, like, all this kind of stuff. And so it's just, like, as hard as that, some of that stuff is, like, I wouldn't trade this phase for anything. Like, I absolutely, again, we've had some difficult spots, and that's just going to be typical with any teenager. I think you're always going to have, like, those moments and those times where they're going to start thinking for themselves and, like, thinking differently than you, or, want to challenge you on certain things. That's so normal, and, something that should be embraced and, like, should create conversation with you in a family setting, but we shouldn't, be too, I'm not concerned isn't the right word, but, like, I think, like, that's exciting to me personally. The fact that we can have, like, real conversations with our teenager right now is super fun.
It's super fun. And it can also, like, don't let it set worry, I guess, because like, it's normal. I mean, again, if you think of yourself as a teenager, you pushed back on a lot of stuff your parents were, like, thought of the world or things like that. And there may have been reasons. There may have been really good reasons for that. And it's interesting. You have the opportunity right now, if they are questioning some things, if they have a different view on something that's going on in the world than you do and things like that, to show them how to have a conversation with somebody that they're not 100% on the same place, because I think that's what the world needs. Well, I know that's what the world needs right now. Instead of being so decisive of like, well, you think that and I think that, so we can't have a conversation, or we cannot be friends, or we cannot be family members. Like, that's not what I desire for our kids and their future, because it's boring to be with people that think all the same way as you do and stuff like that, and to not be challenged and to not be able to have those conversations. And so if Zane comes home, and even, like some conversations are appropriate to have with his siblings around, and sometimes they'll have different views on it and that kind of thing, but to show them and model to them, like, listen, ask questions, why do you think that way, like those kind of things, and like asking those kinds of questions, and then to be able to say something like, can I share what I think, or those kind of things, or here's my experience and this is why I think this way, and like, this is how we have conversations. And like, the world is missing a lot of that right now. And so I think showing your teenager and living for that, and it may be really challenging for you if they're pushing up against something that is like a core value to you, and they aren't aligned with that.
That's hard.
That's hard. But try and keep yourself calm and model for them. Like, be curious, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was just going to say. Like,
be curious. Why do you think that way? Like, don't say, is that because your friends are doing that? Don't like make accusations. Why? Why do you think that way? Where did that come from? Blah, blah, blah. Like, those kinds of things I think are so important for them to realize, like, oh, this is how you're curious about other people, instead of right off the bat judging and shutting them down because they think differently. And that is where some of our coolest conversations I've had with Zane, of like, he knows so much more sometimes, or the things he talks about in school are wildly different than the things we talked about in school. And some of that's culture, some of that is the time we live in now. And that kind of thing. And so, like, for our son to come home and say something like, Mom, have you ever been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted and stuff like that? And I'm like, oh, I guess we're having this. I mean, we've talked about that stuff before, but I've never generally shared my personal experience. But for him to come home and say, like, they made a point that, like, our moms, our sisters, our aunts, like, our friends, like, have all experienced something. And, like, I want to talk to you about that. So there are just so many different things, again, age appropriately, and as not only age appropriately, but personality appropriately. Each kid is different. It's great to be having those conversations, but also then to be having the, like, funny things of, like, let me listen to some of your music, or, here's something we like. And sometimes he's like, this is horrible. Or then other times he's been going around, he listens to Queen a lot and stuff like that, and like sings their songs and everything like that. And we're like, oh, cool. That's
or like, we watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he like absolutely loved it. And like, so, like just things like that, like there's good, so I think it's just fun. It's just really fun.
It is really fun, and it can be fun.
I think it can be fun if you're curious about your teenager.
Yeah. And don't worry if they're questioning things that are like, if you have a faith and they're questioning that, I think that's really good. I want our kids to question it, because I want them to start to own whatever they believe and things like that. And so, again, don't be afraid to have those conversations and be curious of their questions.
It might be hard, but
it might be really hard to hear some of the things they said, and don't come back as the expert either. We both have caught ourselves like, oh, actually, and like, that's not really going to help right now. It's just getting them to talk. Like, again, think of how you feel if you're questioning things, if you are feeling a certain way about something that's going on in the world and things like that, and you make a statement and someone comes back to you with, like, that's not true because blah, blah, blah. That doesn't make you want to talk anymore. And so keeping that curiousness and asking the questions, and then, like, be surprised when you model that, how they'll then ask you questions.
Yeah, exactly.
That Zane will often think, what do you, like, a lot of our conversations are, what do you think about this? Like, what do you think about this?
Yeah, we talked about this in this class today. Like, what do you guys think about that?
And we always say the phrase, too,
cool.
Don't, we'd prefer for you not to Google something, especially if it's anything related to, like, sex or stuff like that. Like, don't Google it. Come to us and ask the question, because we're going to probably know what that is. It may be a different term or something, and we'll have a conversation about it. Or maybe we all have to Google it together. But, like, I don't need images or articles, So, what were you going to say?
Well, no. Yeah, I think even just thinking about, I think, again, because we've tried to be curious about Zane and things like that, like, those types of conversations. And actually, to be honest, Zane is doing that and starting to model that with his younger brother and sister. So I think that that's kind of cool as well, to like see how, you know, he sees us interacting with him. He's starting to interact that with his friends and with his brother and sister, which, you know, so I think it's just, or with others like in our community and things like that, like just seeing him, you know, step into that and being curious about other things as well with others is cool as well too. So,
and I think the phrase, we've done this with our kids, especially as they're learning new things or finding new things out, when they come to you and say, what is this? Or, you know, sorry, I don't know, you probably don't have kids listening right now, but like the first time that Zane came to us this is not in his teenage years, let's be clear. He was 5 when he did this, and he was like, I don't think Santa's real. Is Santa real? And I was like, well, what do you think? What? This is what? Now, hopefully no one's listening with their kids. But asking, well, I didn't say what the answer was. I said, what do you think?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And so, again, same thing. He'll come to us with some kind of statement of XYZ. I think XYZ. Or do you think? And he'll have a question for us. And we're like, well, what do you think?
That's always our first question back to them is, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know,
or
whatever
I heard my friend say
is,
this and I don't know what it means. And we're like, well, what do you think it means?
Yeah.
Or
because I think that
thing.
helps us kind of help steer the conversation, because if they come back to us with something, you know, either silly or like completely off guard or whatever it is, like then we can kind of appropriately know, okay, this is where they're at with that. So that's how we can kind of explain maybe what that is in a different way. Or like, you know, if you know, Zane comes to us and asks us a question and we're like, what do you think? And he comes back with something really wise and all that kind of stuff. Well, that changes the perspective of how we can talk with him about it.
Or sometimes it's we realize we have a little education we need to do in that area because he doesn't understand it. And what you just said about him doing the same thing, modeling that for his siblings now, is like the same thing often happens of like, you know, we've done an episode about like what our dinner table looks like, but like sometimes one of them will say something and Zane's like, what do you think that means? Because sometimes they have used a word or something and they are totally using it out of context because they've heard a friend. I mean, we all do that, right? Yeah. And he is now doing the same thing, and he's like, and then he'll look to us, and we sometimes we'll say, go ahead and tell them what it means, or sometimes they'll look to us to see like, am I allowed to say what it means, or should I? You know, we had a hilarious conversation about a cuss word the other night that someone had used in a context, and all of us and they didn't even know they were using a cuss word. Actually, is what ended up being,
or what it really meant,
or what it actually meant. When we told them what it actually meant, then it was so much laughter. It was hilarious of like, that's not what I meant at all. And we're like, exactly. Just because you hear your friends use in a sentence doesn't mean that's what you're trying to imply when you just said that to your brother or whatever. And then it was funny. But again, we've set that up where instead of just saying, don't say that, it was like, why did you say that? What do you think that means? Like that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's just that openness. And so I think the main things of our thoughts of raising a teenager is like, it actually is fun. Like, yeah,
it's not.
It is fun.
I mean, it's a scary thing to know, like that this human now is becoming
human.
You know, a young adult, and that this
man-child,
and hopefully they're starting to form their thoughts, their own thoughts, and their beliefs, and and they're curious about the world, and we get to help walk alongside them in that, and that's. To me, that's really exciting. It's not something to be scared about, or, you know.
Yeah, our hope, right, is to, I think all of us, right, we want to launch our kids into the world as young adults, whatever stage that is, to be like people who love people well, who are curious about others, who want to care for others, and to not like judge others all the time. And so like, how can you model that in your house right now? And then also, how can you model the fact that like, no matter what age you are, there are different emotions and things that come into play, and how to lovingly deal with people that or lovingly that's not the right word, lovingly walk alongside people. And so I hope that, you know, as we use the roller coaster analogy with them and stuff like that, like, we're not going to do it perfectly, and we have to apologize a lot too. I mean, we have had to apologize for things, and that's important for him to see. But modeling, this is what this messy relationship thing looks like. Like, this is imperfect and it's beautiful at the same time. And so it is stressful, I worry way more than, well, I always worry.
I was going to say it. I don't think that ever stops.
You know, like I'm checking constantly on certain, like he's at the movie, like why the movie should be over. Why does it show that he's not left the movie yet and stuff? And then when he gets home, like, why were you? He's like, I was standing outside talking to my friends. Like we finished our candy that we bought or something. Like, oh, sure. That makes sense. Great. I'm not sure why I was so worried about that, you know? So there's lots of things like that go on, but that's what from the day one since the parent.
Yeah,
that's been the case. Not necessarily him standing outside a movie theater, but you know,
Yeah.
all the other things. So we'd love to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts about raising a teenager, or do you have a tween that is almost there and you're already experiencing some of these
or
things?
Or do you have one that's out of that
out?
That you can
we need to learn
speak
from
wisdom
you.
to us?
Yes,
Yeah.
please. How do you prepare your heart for them leaving the house? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Enough talking about that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of the Laurent Collective podcast. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave a review, which helps others find our podcast. Continue the conversation with us over on Instagram at Laurent Collective.
We look forward to going deeper than just surface talk with you again next